when a farmer gave free vegetables to a hungry veteran. He never expected an entire military convoy to shut down the highway outside his property the very next morning. My jaw dropped when I learned what these soldiers did for this small-town farmer. It's a story that reminds us how one small act of kindness can create ripples that return in ways we could never imagine. This all started on a regular Tuesday morning at Miller's family farm in rural Nebraska. Tom Miller, a third-generation farmer, was setting up his roadside stand like he did every week. Fresh tomatoes, corn, zucchini, and other vegetables harvested that morning were neatly arranged in wooden crates. The sign displaying the prices was placed front and center. Business had been slow lately. The economy was hitting everyone hard, especially in small farming communities like Tom's. But Tom kept showing up, selling what he could and donating the leftovers to the local food bank. It wasn't much, but it was honest work that had sustained his family for decades. Round noon, an older man approached the stand. Tom immediately noticed his worn-out clothes and the veteran's cap he wore proudly despite its frayed edges. The man walked with a slight limp, likely from an old injury, and his weathered face told the story of someone who had seen more than his fair share of hardship. "Good afternoon," Tom greeted with his usual friendly smile. "Anything catch your eye today?" The man, who would later introduce himself as James Wilson, looked at the vegetables with longing. "Just admiring the produce," he said. "Haven't seen tomatoes this red in years." Tom could sense something was wrong. After decades of running the stand, he had developed a sixth sense about his customers. "You a veteran?" Tom asked, nodding toward the cap. "Yes, sir, Vietnam. 1st Infantry Division," James replied, standing a little straighter as he spoke. "My father was in Vietnam too," Tom said. "He always told us stories about how he dreamed of fresh vegetables when he was overseas." James smiled sadly, his eyes distant with memories. "Your father was right. You don't realize how much you miss simple things like fresh tomatoes until you're eating canned rations for months." As they continued talking, Tom learned that James had fallen on hard times. His disability check had been delayed due to some bureaucratic error, and he was struggling to make ends meet. He had served his country honorably, yet here he was, unable to afford even the most basic necessities. "I should get going," James finally said, turning to leave empty-handed. "Just wanted to see what you had, maybe next week when my check comes in." Tom watched him start to walk away, and something in his heart wouldn't let him leave like that. "Hold up," he called out. "I could use some help loading these crates into my truck later. If you've got time, I'd be happy to trade some vegetables for the help." It was a white lie, and both men knew it. But it preserved James's dignity, something Tom understood was incredibly important, especially to a proud veteran like James. "I think I can manage that," James said with a nod of gratitude. Tom began filling a paper bag with the best of everything he had: tomatoes, corn, potatoes, onions, and a jar of his wife's homemade pickles. It wasn't charity in Tom's mind. It was respect. Respect for a man who had given so much for his country and deserved better than what life was currently giving him. As he handed over the bag, Tom slipped in his business card. "If you ever need anything or know someone who does, my farm is always here." James's eyes welled up with tears that he quickly blinked away. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. They don't always see us, the ones who came back." "Well, I see you," Tom replied simply, "and I appreciate what you did for all of us." They shook hands, and James left with his bag of fresh produce, walking a little taller than when he arrived. Tom thought that would be the end of the story, a small interaction on an otherwise ordinary day. He packed up his stand as the sun began to set, drove home, and told his wife about the veteran he'd met. They said a prayer for James that night, hoping things would get better for him soon. What Tom didn't know was that James Wilson wasn't just any veteran. Before his struggles began, James had been a respected staff sergeant who had maintained deep connections with his military brothers and sisters. And that night, James shared the story of Tom's kindness with a few of his old military buddies during their weekly video call. "This farmer didn't just give me food," James told them. "He gave me respect, treated me like a person, not a charity case." One of the men on the call was Colonel Robert Hayes, now commanding officer at the nearby Fort Riley military base. The colonel listened intently as James described Tom's small act of kindness. "What's the name of the farm?" the colonel asked, jotting down the details as James read from Tom's business card. The next morning dawned like any other for Tom Miller. He woke at 5 a.m., had his coffee, and headed out to tend to his crops. It was harvest season, and there was always more work than hours in the day. He was checking the irrigation system in the far field when he heard it, the unmistakable rumble of many vehicles approaching. At first, he thought it might be farm equipment from one of his neighbors, but as the sound grew louder, he realized it was something else entirely. Tom made his way back to the main road and stopped in his tracks, unable to believe what he was seeing. A convoy of military vehicles had pulled up outside his farm. There were transport trucks, jeeps, and even a few personal vehicles with military stickers. And standing at the front in full uniform was Colonel Hayes alongside James Wilson. Traffic had come to a standstill on the rural highway as drivers slowed to see what was happening. Some even pulled over, thinking it might be some kind of emergency or official event. Tom approached cautiously, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Can I help you folks with something?" he asked, completely bewildered by the scene unfolding on his property. Colonel Hayes stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Miller, I'm Colonel Robert Hayes from Fort Riley. This is quite a place you have here." "Thank you," Tom replied, shaking the colonel's hand firmly. "But I'm still not sure I understand what's going on." James stepped forward then, looking considerably more put together than he had the day before. "I hope you don't mind, Tom. I told some friends about what you did for me yesterday." "Some friends?" Tom glanced at the convoy in amazement. Colonel Hayes smiled. "When we heard about your kindness to one of our own, we wanted to return the favor. Many of us at the base come from farming families ourselves. We understand the challenges, especially these days." As they spoke, soldiers began unloading equipment from the trucks, tools, construction materials, and even some agricultural supplies. Others were setting up what looked like a temporary mess hall near Tom's barn. "What's all this?" Tom asked, genuinely confused. "Consider it a community service project," Colonel Hayes explained. "My battalion had some mandatory volunteer hours to fulfill, and your farm seemed like the perfect place to do some good. If that's all right with you, of course." Before Tom could respond, a young lieutenant approached. "Sir, the engineers are ready to begin work on the irrigation system upgrade whenever you give the word." "Irrigation upgrade?" Tom echoed, feeling like he had stepped into someone else's life. James placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. "I mentioned that you were having some trouble with your water system. These guys can fix anything." Over the next several hours, Tom watched in astonishment as nearly 100 soldiers worked throughout his farm. They repaired fencing, reinforced his barn roof, installed a new irrigation system that would save him thousands in water costs, and even built an expanded roadside stand with proper refrigeration units. Word spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors began arriving, first out of curiosity, then staying to help or provide refreshments for the workers. The local diner sent over dozens of sandwiches. The high school band showed up to provide entertainment. It had turned into an impromptu community event. As the day progressed, Tom found himself working alongside Colonel Hayes, reinforcing a section of fence. "I have to ask," Tom said as they worked, "why all this? I just gave the man some vegetables." The colonel paused, driving a fence post into the ground before answering. "Mr. Miller, what you see as just some vegetables meant everything to James in that moment. Not the food itself, but the dignity you showed him." "Anyone would have done the same," Tom insisted. "But they don't," the colonel replied firmly. "Too many of our veterans become invisible when they return home. They fight for a country that often forgets them once the uniform comes off." Tom thought about that as they worked in silence for a few moments. He thought about his own father, who had struggled with nightmares and adjustment issues after Vietnam. How many times had people crossed to the other side of the street to avoid the disturbed veteran? "The military is a family, Mr. Miller," Colonel Hayes continued. "When someone shows kindness to one of us, they show kindness to all of us, and we take care of our own and those who take care of our own." By late afternoon, the transformation of Miller's family farm was remarkable. What had been a struggling operation was now a modernized small farm with infrastructure that would serve Tom and his family for years to come. As the soldiers prepared to leave, they gathered near the new roadside stand. Colonel Hayes presented Tom with a plaque designating Miller's family farm as an official supplier for Fort Riley's mess hall. "We'd like to contract with you to provide fresh produce for the base," the colonel explained. "Fair market value paid on delivery, no bureaucratic delays, I promise." Tom was speechless. Such a contract would secure his farm's financial future and allow him to expand his operations, maybe even hire some local help. "I don't know what to say," Tom finally managed. "Say you'll also let us set up a monthly farm day for our veterans support group," James suggested. "Some of us find peace working with the land. It helps with the memories, you know." Tom nodded, understanding completely. "My dad was the same way, said farming kept him grounded when the flashbacks got bad." "Then it's settled," Colonel Hayes said, offering his hand once more. "Partners." "Partners," Tom agreed, shaking on it. As the convoy prepared to depart, leaving behind a transformed farm and a stunned but grateful farmer, one of the younger soldiers approached Tom. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you," the soldier said. "For what?" Tom asked, confused. "I should be thanking all of you." "My grandfather was a Vietnam vet like James," the young man explained. "He struggled a lot when he came back, Not many people saw him as a person, just as a broken soldier. It means a lot to see someone who still cares. Before Tom could respond, the soldier rejoined his unit, and the convoy began to pull away, honking horns in salute as they departed. Traffic, which had been stopped or slowed for most of the day, finally began to flow normally again. That evening, as the sun set over his improved farm, Tom sat on his porch with his wife, still trying to process everything that had happened. "All because you gave a man some vegetables," she said, squeezing his hand. "It wasn't about the vegetables," Tom replied, remembering Colonel Hayes's words. "It was about seeing him, really seeing him." The story could have ended there, and it would have been remarkable enough. But what happened in the weeks and months that followed truly demonstrated the ripple effect of kindness. A local newspaper ran a front-page story about the military's day at Miller's farm. The story was picked up by regional news, then national. Soon, Tom was receiving letters from all over the country, from veterans, from farmers, from ordinary citizens touched by the story of mutual respect and community support. The veterans group began their monthly visits to the farm, finding healing in the simple act of working the land. Many of them discovered skills they didn't know they had, and a few even went on to start small agricultural businesses of their own, with Tom's guidance. The contract with Fort Riley was just the beginning. Other military bases reached out, wanting to establish similar relationships with local farmers in their areas. A movement began, connecting veterans with agricultural opportunities and creating sustainable food systems for military installations across the country. Tom found himself unexpectedly at the center of it all, speaking at agricultural conferences about the importance of supporting both local farmers and veterans. He always made sure to bring James along, giving him a platform to speak about veterans' issues and the healing power of community. James's disability payment issues were quickly resolved once his story gained attention. But more importantly, he found purpose again. He started working part-time at Tom's farm, then launched a program teaching basic farming skills to fellow veterans dealing with PTSD and reintegration challenges. The expanded roadside stand became a community hub, where locals could not only buy fresh produce, but also learn about supporting veterans in their area. Tom added a donation box, with proceeds going to veteran support programs, and it was never empty. 1 year after that fateful day when James first approached Tom's stand, Miller's family farm hosted a celebration. The entire town turned out, along with Colonel Hayes and many of the soldiers who had participated in the farm transformation. Even a few state representatives attended, interested in replicating the veteran-farmer partnership model elsewhere. During the celebration, Tom took James aside away from the crowds. "I never properly thanked you," Tom said. James looked confused. "Thank me for what? You're the one who helped me when I needed it." "For bringing all of this into my life," Tom explained, gesturing at the thriving farm and the community gathered there. "I was just getting by before, focusing on my own problems. Now I'm part of something bigger." James smiled, understanding perfectly. "That's how it works with kindness. It grows. You never know what seeds you're planting." As they rejoined the celebration, Tom reflected on how true that was. His small act of compassion, giving some vegetables to a hungry veteran, had grown into something he could never have imagined. It had saved his farm, revitalized his community, created opportunities for struggling veterans, and inspired similar initiatives across the country. And it all began because he chose to see a person standing before him, not just a problem he could ignore. The story of Miller's farm and the military convoy that stopped traffic reminds us all of an essential truth. Kindness is never wasted. It may not always return with the dramatic flair of a military convoy shutting down a highway, but it always returns in some form. The seeds of compassion we plant today grow in ways we cannot predict and often cannot see. In a world that can sometimes feel divided and cold, Tom and James's story stands as a testament to the power of seeing one another's humanity and responding with simple decency. It doesn't take grand gestures or significant resources. Sometimes, all it takes is offering what you have to someone who needs it, whether that's fresh vegetables from your garden or respect for a forgotten hero. As Colonel Hayes said that day on the farm, "When someone shows kindness to one of us, they show kindness to all of us." Perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that in the act of helping one person, we create ripples that can lift an entire community. The next time you have the opportunity to help someone, remember Tom Miller and his roadside vegetable stand. Remember that you never know who that person might be, what battles they might be fighting, or how your small act of kindness might set in motion changes that transform not just their life, but yours and countless others as well. Because in the end, the greatest harvests often come from the smallest seeds of kindness. That's the real miracle of Miller's farm, not the military convoy that stopped traffic for a day, but the convoy of compassion that continues to travel from person to person, carrying the simple message that we all matter, We all deserve to be seen, and we all have something valuable to give. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button now to hear more incredible tales of everyday heroes making extraordinary differences in their communities. Our next video about a homeless man who saved a billionaire's life will leave you equally amazed.